He ruled New York with a word. But on a freezing November night, Vincenzo Marcello wasn't a king. He was just another dying man bleeding out on diner linoleum. People stepped over him like trash. Then a waitress with blonde braids shattered a coffee pot, knelt in his blood, and spoke one sentence in ancient Sicilian, a phrase only Mafia royalty should know. That sentence didn't just save his life. It declared war on everyone who thought he was dead. Before we dive into this story, I need you to understand something. Right now, somewhere in your city, someone is dying. Not literally, though maybe that too, but dying in the ways that matter. Their dreams bleeding out on minimum wage paychecks. Their potential stepped over by people too busy checking their phones to notice. Their voice screaming in a language nobody bothers to learn. And we walk past them. Every single day. Just like those people in the diner walked past Vincenzo Marcello. You're about to meet a woman who spent 15 years being invisible. 15 years watching her mother's murderer smile and prosper while she served coffee to people who never learned her name. 15 years of the world telling her she didn't matter, her pain didn't matter, her mother's death didn't deserve justice. But here's what the world didn't count on. Rachel DeLuca was paying attention. While everyone else forgot, she remembered. While everyone else moved on, she planned. While everyone else told her to let it go, to be grateful she survived, to stay quiet and invisible, she sharpened herself into a weapon. And when the moment came, when the most powerful man in New York was bleeding out and everyone else chose cowardice, she made a different choice. So before you scroll past this, before you add it to your watch later list that you'll never actually watch, ask yourself, how many times have you been that person in the diner? How many times have you seen someone struggling and told yourself it's not your problem? How many Rachels have you walked past because acknowledging their pain was inconvenient? This story is going to make you uncomfortable. It's going to show you what happens when invisibility becomes a superpower, when patience becomes devastation, when a woman the world dismissed becomes the most dangerous person in it. And if you're brave enough to see it through, if you're willing to watch a ghost become a queen, then you need to make me a promise right now. Don't just watch. Don't just consume this like passive entertainment and move on with your day. Actually engage. Drop a comment. Hit subscribe. Share this with someone who needs to know that being overlooked doesn't mean being powerless. That survival can transform into revolution. That the person you ignore today might be the queen who rules tomorrow. Because Rachel's story isn't just about the mafia. It's about every person who's been told they're not enough. Not strong enough. Not important enough. Not worthy enough. It's about proving them all wrong. So here's the deal. I'm about to give you 9 chapters of blood, betrayal, and vengeance served cold. I'm about to show you how a waitress, with nothing to lose, dismantled an empire built on fear. But I need something from you in return. I need you to witness this. Really see it. Because stories like this, about people like Rachel, they only matter if someone remembers them. And for 15 years, nobody remembered her mother. Nobody remembered her. Nobody cared. Don't be another person who walks past. Hit that subscribe button right now. Not later. Now. Comment, I see you, Rachel, if you're ready to watch invisibility become power. Share this with someone who needs to hear that their time is coming. Because this story, it's not just entertainment. It's a mirror. And the question isn't whether Rachel gets her revenge. The question is, what will you do the next time you see someone dying on a diner floor while everyone else walks past? Will you kneel? Or will you keep walking? Your answer starts right here, right now, with one simple choice. Subscribe, engage, and become part of something bigger than just a story. Become part of the revolution that says every voice matters. Every ghost deserves to be seen. Every queen starts somewhere. Now, let's begin. And remember, blood calls to blood. But it's calling to you too. Let's see if you answer. The fluorescent lights of Max's all-night diner buzzed against the November darkness, casting sickly yellow pools across cracked vinyl booths. Outside, Brooklyn slept through its own slow death, sirens wailing, trash tumbling down empty streets, the city's heartbeat reduced to an irregular pulse. Vincenzo Marcello pushed through the glass door, one hand pressed hard against the wound beneath his ribs. The expensive fabric of his tailored black suit was already ruined, dark with blood that wouldn't stop coming. His legs shook with each step. For 20 years, his name had been a weapon.
Vincenzo Marcello.
Men confessed their sins at the sound of it. Families paid tribute just to keep breathing. He had built an empire on fear and respect, on blood oaths sworn in candlelit basements and debts paid with loyalty that went to the grave. But power is a fiction you believe in until the moment it abandons you. The ambush at the warehouse hadn't come from rivals or the feds. It had come from inside. From Matteo Ricci, the man he'd called brother for 30 years. The man he'd trusted with everything. The bullet tearing through Vincenzo's side had been fired by a gun he'd given as a gift, held by a hand he'd embraced like family. "Help," Vincenzo rasped, gripping the counter. His voice came out broken, foreign to his own ears. "I need." The manager, a thick man with a grease-stained shirt and dead eyes, glanced up from his phone. He saw the sweat. He saw the blood seeping between Vincenzo's fingers. Mostly, he saw trouble. "Bathrooms for customers only," the manager said, his voice flat as pavement. "And we're closing." Vincenzo looked around the diner. A businessman in the corner booth suddenly found his newspaper fascinating. Two teenagers at the counter went silent, their eyes wide with fear before they turned away. An elderly woman clutched her purse tighter and stared out the window. The bystander effect. They saw a dying man and categorized him as someone else's problem, a drunk, a junkie, a danger they didn't want near them. Vincenzo's knees gave out. He collapsed against the counter and slid down, his body hitting the linoleum floor with a sound that echoed through the empty diner. The cold tile pressed against his cheek. Above him, the ceiling fan spun in lazy circles, counting down the seconds of his life. This was how it ended. Not in a blaze of gunfire. Not surrounded by soldiers swearing vengeance. But here, on a floor that reeked of bleach and desperation, kicked aside by strangers who didn't even know his name. Traditore, Vincenzo whispered in Sicilian, the old language slipping out as consciousness slipped away. Bastardi codardi. Traitors. Cowardly bastards. The words were meant for no one. A dying curse for the universe that had betrayed him. Then came the crash. Ceramic exploding against tile. Coffee spreading across the floor in dark rivers. A young woman rushed forward, ignoring the manager's shouted protests about the broken pot. She wore a cream-colored blouse and red apron, her long blonde hair woven into intricate braids that framed a face marked by tired eyes and carefully hidden scars. She had been invisible a moment ago, just part of the scenery, another ghost in the city of ghosts. She dropped to her knees beside him, her hands rough from years of dish soap and hard work. She didn't look at his face. She looked at the wound, assessing, calculating. The manager grabbed her shoulder. "Rachel, leave him. I'm calling the cops." She slapped his hand away with such ferocity, the large man stumbled backward. Then she leaned close to Vincenzo, so close he could smell coffee and something else, lavender, maybe, or jasmine. Her voice dropped to a whisper that cut through the fluorescent hum and the manager's cursing like a blade through silk.
Il sangue non si lava con l'acqua, Don Marcello. Si lava con il sangue.
Vincenzo's eyes snapped open, fighting the darkness that wanted to pull him under. Blood is not washed with water, Don Marcello. It is washed with blood. It was an ancient phrase from the villages near Corleone, known only to the oldest families. A recognition of status. A promise of vengeance. A blood oath spoken in a dying language. "Who?" Vincenzo gasped. "Shut up," Rachel said in perfect, unaccented English. Her hands were already moving, wadding her apron against his wound, applying pressure that made him grunt in pain. "And don't you dare die on me, Don Marcello. Not until I get what I came for." Her eyes met his, and for the first time in 20 years, Vincenzo Marcello felt something he hadn't felt since he was a boy hiding from his father's enemies in a Palermo basement. Recognition. This girl wasn't saving him out of compassion. She was saving him because she needed him alive. And somehow, impossibly, she knew exactly who he was and what he was worth. Outside, sirens wailed closer. The manager was shouting into his phone. The other customers were filming on their phones, treating his death like entertainment. But Rachel's hands never stopped moving. Her blonde braids swung forward, and Vincenzo saw a small scar along her jawline, barely visible beneath makeup. A scar that told a story of survival.
Chi sei? He whispered.
Who are you? Rachel's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Someone who's been waiting 15 years for you to need saving, Don Marcello. Someone you forgot existed. She pressed harder against the wound, and Vincenzo cried out, "Now stay conscious. Because blood calls to blood, and we have a war to start." The last thing Vincenzo saw before the darkness finally took him was her eyes. Cold, calculating, and absolutely certain. Eyes that had seen death before. Eyes that had memorized its face. Eyes that belonged to a ghost he thought he'd buried a lifetime ago. This is the story of how one sentence started a war, and how the woman the world ignored became the most dangerous person in it. The coffee spread across the linoleum like spilled ink, mixing with Vincenzo's blood until the two became indistinguishable. Rachel pressed her wadded apron harder against his wound, and he felt the world tilting, the fluorescent lights above stretching into streaks of dying stars. "I'll sang Kayama sang," she whispered, her voice so low only he could hear it. "Blood calls to blood." Then she leaned closer, her breath warm against his ear, and spoke words that cut through the fog of his dying mind like a scalpel.
Conosco il tuo nome, Vincenzo Marcello, e conosco chi ti ha tradito.
I know your name, Vincenzo Marcello, and I know who betrayed you. Vincenzo's fingers clawed at her arm, weak but desperate. Matteo. I know, she said simply. Not a question. A statement of fact. The manager was shouting now, threatening to call the police, his voice rising to a panicked pitch. The businessman in the corner had his phone out, recording. The teenagers were backing toward the door. Everyone wanted to be anywhere but here, witnesses to nothing, complicit in everything. Rachel ignored them all. She hooked her arms under Vincenzo's shoulders with a strength that shouldn't have existed in someone so small, and she dragged him. His expensive shoes scraped against the tile, leaving dark smears. His vision blurred. The pain in his side erupted into white-hot agony that made him gasp. "Stop," he managed. "If I stop, you die," she said, her voice matter-of-fact. "Clinical. And I didn't wait 15 years for you to die in a diner that smells like failure and burnt hash browns." 15 years. The number echoed in his skull, trying to connect to something, but his mind was shutting down, conserving what little energy remained. The glass door hit his shoulder as she kicked it open. November air slapped his face, cold and merciless. She pulled him across the sidewalk, his legs useless beneath him, his weight entirely on her. Somewhere behind them, the manager was still yelling, but the sound was fading, becoming distant and unimportant. A car door opened, old hinges screaming. She shoved him into a back seat that smelled of cigarettes and cheap air freshener, his body folding into the cramped space like a discarded suit. His head lolled against cracked leather. Through the window, he could see the neon sign of the diner flickering, casting red and blue shadows across the empty street. Rachel slid into the driver's seat, turned the key. The engine coughed to life, reluctant but obedient. She didn't look back at him, didn't check if he was still breathing. She simply drove, merging into the sparse late-night traffic as if she hadn't just kidnapped one of the most powerful men in New York. Vincenzo's hand found his wound again, pressing weakly against the soaked fabric. He tried to speak, but his tongue felt thick, foreign. The streetlights overhead became a blur of motion, a tunnel pulling him down into darkness. Who is this girl? The thought came unbidden, desperate. She knew his name. She knew the old language. She knew about Matteo. She'd spoken of 15 years like it meant something, like it was a countdown that had finally reached zero. His mind grasped at fragments, trying to piece together a puzzle with pieces he couldn't see. Blonde braids, rough hands, that scar on her jawline, eyes that had seen too much. The way she'd moved, efficient, practiced, unafraid. Sophia. The name exploded in his consciousness like a gunshot. Sofia De Luca. His cousin. Dead 15 years. Murdered with her daughter in a home invasion that had never been solved, never been questioned. But Sofia's daughter had been 8 years old. Just a child. And everyone said she died with her mother, burned in the fire they'd set to cover their tracks. Everyone said. Vincenzo tried to lift his head, tried to look at the woman driving, but his body refused to obey. The darkness was pulling him under, dragging him down into depths where memory and reality blurred together. Who? He whispered, the word barely audible. Rachel's eyes met his in the rearview mirror. For just a moment, he saw it. The ghost of a little girl hiding in a closet, watching her mother die, memorizing the faces of her killers. Someone you forgot, she said softly. Someone everyone forgot. Then the darkness swallowed him whole. Underscore 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 underscore. The man who ruled New York just realized he owes his life to a ghost. But ghosts don't save people without a reason, and Rachel's reason has been 15 years in the making. What do you think she's really after? Drop a comment below and subscribe because the next chapter reveals the truth that will change everything. 15 years earlier. The closet smelled like lavender and cedar, the scent of her mother's dresses hanging above 8-year-old Rachel's head. She pressed herself against the back wall, her small hands covering her mouth, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her chest. Through the slats in the door, she could see the kitchen. Her mother, Sofia De Luca, stood by the sink in her cream-colored robe, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. She was beautiful. She was always beautiful. You don't have to do this, Matteo. Her mother's voice was steady, but Rachel heard the tremor underneath, the fear trying to hide itself as reason. Uncle Matteo stood near the table, hands in the pockets of his expensive coat. He looked the same as always, kind eyes, gentle smile, the man who brought Rachel birthday presents and called her Piccola Principessa, little princess.
Ido, Sofa.
His voice was soft, almost apologetic. You shouldn't have gone through those files. You shouldn't have seen. I won't tell anyone. Matteo, please, we're family. Family. He said the word like it tasted bitter. Family is the problem, Cara. You're a De Luca. He trusts De Lucas. As long as you're alive, you're a loose end I can't afford. Two men emerged from the shadows of the hallway. Rachel didn't recognize them. They wore black, their faces hard and empty. Professional. One of them held something dark and metallic that caught the kitchen light. Her mother saw them. Understood. Her hand moved toward the knife block on the counter, but she was too slow, had always been too slow for this world her family had built around violence. Rachel's upstairs, Sofia said quickly, desperately. She's just a baby. Please, Matteo. Please don't. I know where she is. Matteo's voice never rose, never wavered. He nodded to the men. The sound was impossibly loud. A crack that split the world in half. Sofia De Luca stumbled backward, her hand pressed to her chest, her eyes wide with shock and something that looked like betrayal. She tried to speak, but only blood came out, spilling between her fingers, running down her robe in dark rivers.
She fell.
Her body hit the tile with a sound Rachel would hear in her nightmares for the rest of her life. Inside the closet, Rachel bit down on her palm, so hard she drew blood. Tears streamed down her face, but she didn't make a sound.
Couldn't.
If she made a sound, they would find her. If they found her, she would end up on the kitchen floor next to her mother. Through the slats, she watched Uncle Matteo walk to her mother's body. He knelt, checking for a pulse with the casual efficiency of someone checking meat at a market. He stood, adjusted his coat. Burn it, he said. Make it look like a home invasion. And find the girl. Rachel's blood turned to ice. Footsteps on the stairs. Heavy boots. Men's voices calling her name in false sweetness. Rachel, honey, where are you? Your mama needs you. She pressed deeper into the closet, wedging herself behind a box of her mother's shoes. She pulled dresses down around her like camouflage, fabric covering her completely. She could smell her mother's perfume, jasmine and vanilla, and she bit her lip harder to keep from sobbing. The bedroom door burst open. Footsteps circling. The closet door rattled, opened. Light flooded in. A man's voice frustrated. Nothing. She probably ran out the back. Searched the neighborhood. She's 8 years old. She couldn't have gone far. But Rachel had gone somewhere farther than distance could measure. Buried beneath silk and cotton, breathing through fabric, she left her body entirely. She became a thing without sound, without presence, without existence. A ghost. Later, hours or minutes, she couldn't tell, sirens screamed outside. Red and blue lights painted the walls. Smoke detectors shrieked. Flames crackled somewhere downstairs, consuming evidence, consuming her mother, consuming everything she'd ever known. A firefighter found her, pulled her from the closet, carried her down through smoke and chaos. She didn't fight,
Didn't speak.
just stared with eyes that had seen too much, remembered too much. At the hospital, police officers spoke in hushed voices. Social workers with kind faces and lying eyes. Your mother is gone, sweetheart. You're safe now. We're going to take care of you. They gave her a new name, new papers, told her it was for her protection, that the men who killed her mother might come back. They put her into foster care in a different borough, erased Sofia DeLuca's daughter from every record, every memory. Everyone believed the DeLuca bloodline had ended that night. But Rachel knew better. She'd watched Uncle Mateo's face as he gave the order. Watched him check her mother's pulse with hands that had held Rachel on his knee and told her stories. Watched him walk away, without looking back. She didn't scream. Didn't cry in front of the officers, or the social workers, or the foster families who took her in and gave her up and took her in again. She memorized every detail, every word, every second. And she waited. Underscore 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 underscore. A child watched her mother's murder and became a ghost. For 15 years, she's been invisible, waiting for the perfect moment. But revenge isn't just about killing the monster, it's about making him see you coming. What would you do if you had to wait 15 years for justice? Comment below and subscribe, because Rachel's plan is about to unfold, and it's more ruthless than anyone imagined. Vincenzo woke to the smell of antiseptic and the sharp sting of needle and thread pulling through his skin. His eyes snapped open, hand instinctively reaching for a gun that wasn't there. Pain erupted in his side, white-hot and immediate, forcing a strangled gasp from his throat. "Move again, and you'll rip the stitches," a voice said calmly. "Then you'll bleed out on my couch, and I didn't drag your heavy ass up 3 flights of stairs just to mop you off my furniture." His vision focused. A tiny apartment, maybe 400 square feet. Water-stained ceiling. A kitchenette with 2 burners. Thrift store furniture that had seen better decades. And the blonde waitress from the diner, sitting beside him with a needle in her hand, her apron traded for a gray tank top spotted with his blood. Vincenzo tried to sit up. The room spun violently. "I said don't move." Rachel pushed him back down with one hand, surprisingly strong. "You've got 3 bullets in you, well, 2 now. I'm not a surgeon, but I've watched enough YouTube videos to keep you alive." "Barely." "Where?" His throat was sandpaper. "Where am I?" "My apartment. Above a laundromat in Sunset Park. Welcome to How the Other Half Lives, Don Marcello." She tied off the last stitch with practiced efficiency, cutting the thread with small scissors. "You've been out for 6 hours. Mateo probably thinks you're dead by now." At Mateo's name, rage flooded Vincenzo's system, stronger than the pain. He grabbed Rachel's wrist hard enough to bruise. "Who the hell are you?" She didn't flinch, didn't pull away, just met his eyes with the same cold calculation he'd seen in the diner. "Rachel DeLuca," she said quietly. "Sophia's daughter. The one who died 15 years ago." The name hit him like a fist to the chest. Sophia. His cousin, his blood. The woman who'd been gunned down in a home invasion that had never made sense, never had suspects, never had justice. And her daughter. "You were 8 years old." Vincenzo's hand loosened, fell away. "They said you died in the fire." They lied. Or they believed what they wanted to believe. Rachel stood, moving to the sink to wash his blood from her hands. "Social services gave me a new identity, new name, told me it was for my protection, put me in the system, and forgot I existed. But you didn't die."
No.
"I just stopped being Rachel DeLuca." She dried her hands on a towel, her movements mechanical. "I became nobody, a ghost. Went through 7 foster homes in 10 years. Learned to be invisible. Learned that the world doesn't care about dead little girls or their dead mothers." Vincenzo's mind was racing, connecting pieces he should have seen years ago. Sophia's murder had been too clean, too professional.
No witnesses.
No evidence. The case went cold within weeks, and he'd been too busy consolidating power to push harder. "You were there," he said, the realization settling like lead in his gut. "You saw it happen." Rachel turned to face him, and for the first time, he saw the child she'd been beneath the woman she'd become. "I watched from a closet. Watched Matteo Ricci, the man my mother loved, the man I called uncle, give the order. Watched him check her pulse like he was checking the time. Watched him tell his men to burn the house and find me."
Dio mio.
Vincenzo's hand went to his face, covering his eyes. Sophia. His cousin. His responsibility. And he'd never known, never questioned, never avenged. "I've been waiting 15 years, Vincenzo. 15 years of being invisible. Working minimum wage jobs. Living in apartments that smell like mold and broken dreams. Watching Matteo rise through your organization, becoming your underboss, your brother, your most trusted man." Her voice remained steady, but something dangerous flickered in her eyes. "Do you know what that's like? Watching your mother's murder prosper while you scrape together rent money." Vincenzo sat up slowly, gritting his teeth against the pain. The room stopped spinning. He looked at this girl. No, this woman, who'd saved his life with nothing to gain but revenge. "Sophia was family," he said finally. "Her blood is my blood. You should have inherited everything: territory, money, protection. You should have been raised as DeLuca royalty. Should have been. Wasn't." Rachel crossed her arms. "But I'm not here for inheritance, Vincenzo. I'm here because you're the only person Matteo fears. And now he thinks you're dead." Vincenzo understood then. Why she'd saved him. Why she'd revealed herself. He was a weapon she'd been waiting 15 years to load. "If you saved my life, I owe you a debt," he said, the old traditions rising automatic in his throat. "Blood for blood. Tell me what you want." Rachel moved closer, her shadow falling across him like a promise. When she spoke, her voice was the same cold whisper she'd used in the diner, but now he heard the 15 years of rage beneath it. "I want Matteo Ricci dead. And I want the world to know why. I want every family to know he murdered Sofia DeLuca and her 8-year-old daughter. I want his name erased from history, like he erased mine. Then we have a common enemy. We have more than that." Her lips curved into something sharp. "We have surprise. Matteo thinks he won. That's when men like him get careless." Vincenzo extended his hand, ignoring the pull of stitches. "Allies." Rachel looked at his hand for a long moment. Then she took it, her grip firm. "Allies," she agreed. "But understand something, Vincenzo, when this is over, I'm not going back to being invisible. I'm not going back to being nobody." "Good," he said. "Because ghosts don't bleed. And we're going to need someone Matteo can't see coming." Underscore 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 underscore. The ghost and the king just formed an alliance built on blood and vengeance. But Matteo Ricci has been untouchable for 15 years. What makes them think they can bring him down now? Drop your theories in the comments and hit subscribe, because the next chapter is where the hunter becomes the hunted. Il Primo occupied the top floor of a midtown high-rise, all floor-to-ceiling windows and Italian marble, where a single bottle of wine cost more than most people made in a month. Tonight, every table was full. Every boss in New York had come to witness history, the coronation of Matteo Ricci as head of the Marcello family. Matteo stood at the center table, champagne glass raised, his smile wide and victorious. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost $10,000, a gold Rolex catching the light. Around him, men who'd built empires on blood and intimidation laughed at his jokes, toasted his success, bent the knee to New York's newest king. To new beginnings, Matteo declared, his voice carrying across the restaurant. To loyalty. To family. The word family hung in the air like a curse he didn't recognize. And to Vincenzo Marcello, Matteo continued, his face arranging itself into something resembling grief. A great man taken from us too soon. May he rest in. The main doors burst open. Every head turned. Conversations died mid-sentence. Someone's fork clattered against a plate. Vincenzo Marcello walked through the entrance like resurrection itself. He moved slowly, deliberately, his tailored black suit immaculate despite the bandages hidden beneath. His face was pale, but his eyes burned with something beyond rage. He was thinner than a week ago, moved with a slight limp that favored his wounded side, but he was undeniably, impossibly alive. The silence was absolute. Matteo's champagne glass slipped from his fingers, exploding against marble in a shower of crystal and expensive wine. His face drained of color, going from triumphant bronze to corpse white in seconds. Matteo. Vincenzo's voice cut through the silence, like a blade. You look surprised to see me. Were you expecting someone else? Maybe a corpse? No one moved. 50 of the most dangerous men in New York sat frozen, caught between two kings, unsure which one to follow. Vincenzo walked forward, his footsteps echoing. Please, don't stop the celebration on my account. I believe you were toasting my death. How touching. Vincenzo. Matteo found his voice, forced a smile that looked like a wound. Thank God. We thought, the reports said you were
dead.
Vincenzo stopped 10 feet away. Yes, I imagine that's what your men reported. Hard to confirm when you leave someone bleeding in a diner, isn't it? Tell me, Matteo, did you check the body yourself? Or did you just assume 3 bullets would do the job? Whispers erupted around the room. Men exchanged glances, hands drifting toward concealed weapons. Matteo's smile cracked. I don't know what you think happened, but I think you ambushed me at the warehouse. I think you've been planning this for years. Vincenzo reached into his jacket. Every gun in the room cleared leather simultaneously, safeties clicking off in a symphony of imminent violence. But Vincenzo only pulled out a manila envelope. He threw it on Matteo's table. Photographs spilled out, Matteo meeting with men in FBI windbreakers, documents bearing federal seals, bank statements showing money siphoned from family accounts. 5 years, Vincenzo said coldly. 5 years you've been stealing from us. Meeting with federal agents. Setting up your coup. And you did it all while calling me brother. Matteo's face twisted, the mask finally shattering. You were weak, Vincenzo.
Soft.
Too concerned with honor and tradition while the world changed around us. Someone had to. And Sofia De Luca? Vincenzo's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the room. What was she? Weak?
Soft?
Or just inconvenient because she discovered your betrayal 15 years too early? The color that had returned to Matteo's face vanished again. Around the room, the older bosses stirred. They remembered Sofia, remembered the De Luca family, remembered a murder that had never sat right. "I have proof," Vincenzo continued. "Ballistics reports. Witness statements. Matteo Ricci murdered Sofia De Luca and her 8-year-old daughter to cover his tracks. He's been a traitor since before some of you even took your oaths." "That's a lie." Matteo's hand moved toward his waistband. Time fractured. Matteo drew his weapon. Vincenzo's bodyguards, the ones who'd stayed loyal, who'd been waiting outside, burst through side doors, guns raised. Half the bosses in the room stood with Vincenzo. The other half stood with Matteo, realizing too late they'd bet on the wrong horse. The first shot shattered a window. Then hell erupted. Gunfire exploded from every direction. Tables overturned, becoming cover. Crystal chandeliers shattered, raining glass. Men who'd sat together minutes ago now killed each other across blood-slicked marble. The celebration became a massacre, alliances fracturing in real time as everyone chose their side or died trying to stay neutral. Vincenzo dove behind the bar as bullets chewed through expensive wood. He returned fire methodically, each shot deliberate. This wasn't about killing everyone, it was about sending a message. Matteo had overplayed his hand, and now the entire underworld would burn for it. Across the chaos, Vincenzo caught sight of Matteo retreating toward the kitchen, his face contorted with rage and fear. Their eyes met for one moment, betrayer and betrayed, and Vincenzo saw the truth. Matteo had never expected him to survive, had never planned for resurrection. That was his first mistake. Matteo disappeared through the kitchen doors. By the time Vincenzo reached them, his former brother was gone, escaped down a service elevator, vanished into the city like the rat he'd always been. The shooting stopped. Smoke hung in the air, mixing with the smell of gunpowder and spilled wine. Bodies littered the floor, some dead, others dying, all of them casualties of a civil war that had just begun. Vincenzo stood in the center of the carnage, breathing hard, his wound screaming. But he was standing. He was alive. And every surviving boss in that room knew one truth now. The king had returned from the dead, and he wanted his crown back in blood. Underscore 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 underscore. Matteo's celebration became his nightmare. But he escaped, and a wounded animal is the most dangerous kind. The war for New York has officially begun, and neither side will stop until the other is erased from history. Who do you think survives this? Comment below and subscribe because the next chapter reveals the one weapon that could end everything, the witness list that every family fears. The war lasted 3 days before someone spoke the words that changed everything. The list. It started as a whisper in a Brooklyn social club, spread through encrypted messages, exploded into panic across every family in New York. For 20 years, it had been urban legend, a compilation of every name, every testimony, every piece of cooperation given to federal investigators. Informants, witnesses, men who'd traded loyalty for immunity, secrets for survival. If the list was real, it was a nuclear weapon. Whoever controlled it controlled life and death for half the underworld. Vincenzo sat in the back room of a butcher shop in Little Italy, his wound still tender beneath fresh bandages, listening to his lieutenant confirm what he'd hoped wasn't true. "Father Giuseppe has it," Carlos said, his voice low. "Hidden somewhere in St. Anthony's Cathedral. He's been the keeper for 2 decades, neutral ground, protected by God and reputation." "Not anymore." Vincenzo's jaw tightened. "If we know, Matteo knows. And Matteo doesn't respect neutral ground." He was right. By the time Vincenzo's men reached St. Anthony's Cathedral, the heavy wooden doors were splintered, hanging crooked on ancient hinges. Inside, votive candles lay scattered across stone floors, their wax mixing with something darker. Blood. fresh blood leading toward the sacristy. Father Giuseppe was gone. Vincenzo stood in the violated sanctuary, his hands curling into fists. Matteo had taken a priest, had desecrated a church. There were rules, traditions that even monsters respected. But Matteo had become something beyond monster, something desperate and therefore infinitely more dangerous. He'll torture him, Carlos said quietly. Father Giuseppe is 70 years old. He won't last long. Find me Matteo's location. Every safe house, every property, every. I already know where he is. Vincenzo turned. Rachel stood in the cathedral entrance, silhouetted against afternoon light. She wore all black, jeans, jacket, boots designed for movement. Her blonde braids were pulled back tight, revealing the scar on her jawline she usually hid. She looked like a different person. Harder. Colder.
How? Vincenzo demanded.
Because I've been watching Matteo for 15 years. I know every property he owns, every hole he hides in when things go bad. She walked forward, her footsteps echoing through the empty church. He's at the warehouse in Red Hook, the one near the shipping docks. 3 exits, 10 men minimum, probably more by now. Then we go in heavy. 20 soldiers, full assault.
No.
Rachel's voice was flat, final. You go in with an army. He kills Father Giuseppe the second he hears gunfire. He's probably already torturing him, but he won't kill him until he has the list. That gives us a window. A window for what? For me to get inside. She met his eyes, and Vincenzo saw the decision already made, carved into her expression like stone. I've been invisible my whole life. Matteo's seen me exactly once, 15 years ago, and I was 8 years old. He has no idea what I look like now. Absolutely not. Vincenzo stepped closer, ignoring the pull of his wound. You're not walking into that alone. It's suicide. It's strategy. Rachel's voice remained calm, but something fierce burned beneath it. Father Giuseppe kept that list because he believed in redemption. Believed that even traitors deserved a chance at confession, at peace. If Matteo gets it, he'll execute every name on it. Their families, their children. He'll burn the world down just to prove he can. And if he catches you, then I die the way my mother died. She said it without drama, without fear. Just fact. But at least I'll die trying to stop him instead of hiding like I've done for 15 years.
Carlo shifted uncomfortably.
Boss, she's right about the approach. We hit that warehouse hard. Everyone inside dies. Including the priest. Vincenzo wanted to argue, wanted to forbid it, but he built an empire on cold calculation. And the calculation here was brutal. One woman had a better chance than an army. You get in, you find Father Giuseppe, you get out, he said finally. You don't engage Matteo. You don't play hero. Understood. Rachel smiled, sharp and mirthless. I stopped believing in heroes when I was 8 years old, Vincenzo. I'll get your priest. But I'm making no promises about Matteo. She turned to leave. Rachel. Vincenzo's voice stopped her.
Why?
Why risk this? You wanted Matteo dead. We can do that without the list. Without Father Giuseppe. Why does an old priest matter to you? She looked back, and for a moment, Vincenzo saw the child she'd been. The girl who'd hidden in a closet while her mother died. The girl who'd spent 15 years becoming invisible so she could survive long enough to strike. Because Father Giuseppe is the one who buried my mother, Rachel said quietly. After Matteo killed her, after they burned the house, Father Giuseppe made sure Sofia De Luca had a proper funeral.
A real grave.
He didn't know me anything, but he gave my mother dignity when everyone else just wanted to forget. She pulled her jacket tighter. So yes, I'll walk into hell for him. Because someone has to remember that good people exist in this world, even if it's just to make sure the monsters don't win. Then she was gone, disappearing into the afternoon light like the ghost she'd trained herself to be. Vincenzo stood in the violated cathedral, surrounded by spilled blood and broken vows, and realized something that terrified him more than Matteo's betrayal. Rachel De Luca wasn't trying to survive anymore. She was trying to matter. And people with nothing to lose were the most dangerous weapons of all. Underscore 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 and four. The red dress cost $200 Rachel didn't have, purchased with a credit card that would max out and never get paid. It hugged every curve, ended mid-thigh, transformed her from invisible waitress into the kind of woman men noticed and immediately underestimated. She'd left her blonde braids down, applied makeup heavy enough to obscure her features, wore heels that forced her to walk differently, slower, more deliberate, like she had nowhere important to be. The warehouse in Red Hook had been converted into something obscene, a fortress disguised as a gentleman's club. Matteo was celebrating again, throwing a private party for his inner circle while Father Giuseppe bled somewhere in the basement. Music pulsed through reinforced walls. Armed men stood at every entrance, checking IDs, patting down anyone who looked remotely suspicious. Rachel walked past them like she belonged there. Name? The guard at the door was massive, tattoos crawling up his neck, a gun visible beneath his jacket. Sophia. She smiled, the kind of smile she'd practiced in mirrors for a week.
Sultry.
Empty. Available. Marco sent me. Said you boys were celebrating something special tonight. The guard checked his phone, scrolling through messages. Marco was one of Matteo's lieutenants, and Marco had a weakness for high-end call girls that Rachel had discovered through careful observation. She'd hacked his messages 2 days ago, learned the password, sent herself an invitation from his phone. Yeah, okay. The guard stepped aside. Champagne room is on the second floor. Keep the boss happy, you'll get paid well. Rachel walked inside, her heart hammering against her ribs, so hard she thought it might bruise. Red and blue lights pulsed across faces she recognized from Vincenzo's intelligence reports. Soldiers, enforcers, killers who'd sworn loyalty to Matteo's coup. They drank expensive liquor, laughed too loud, celebrated a war they thought they were winning. None of them looked at her twice. She was furniture, decoration, invisible in a different way. She moved through the crowd, planting evidence as she went. A folder left on a table, bank statements showing Matteo's offshore accounts, money skimmed from family operations. A flash drive slipped into a soldier's jacket pocket, containing emails proving Matteo planned to eliminate his own men once he consolidated power. Seeds of doubt. Seeds of betrayal. The same weapon Matteo had used on Vincenzo, now turned back on him. The second floor was quieter. Private rooms with closed doors. Guards stationed outside, but fewer of them. Rachel found a bathroom, locked herself inside, pulled a compact pistol from her clutch. Vincenzo's gun, small enough to hide, deadly enough to matter. Then she went hunting. The basement entrance was exactly where she'd predicted, a maintenance door marked, authorized only. One guard standing watch with a bored expression. Rachel approached, stumbling slightly, giggling like she'd had too much champagne. Wrong floor, sweetheart, the guard said, not unkindly. I'm so lost. She leaned against the wall, playing drunk. Where's the bathroom? Back that way. She drove her heel into his instep, her fist into his throat, her knee into his groin in 3 rapid movements. He went down gasping, and she caught him before he could make noise, dragging him into a storage closet.
Took his keycard.
His radio.
His gun.
The basement stairs descended into darkness that smelled of mold and something copper.
Blood.
She found Father Giuseppe in the third room, tied to a chair beneath a single flickering bulb. His face was a ruin of bruises and cuts, one eye swollen shut, blood crusted around his mouth. But he was breathing.
Barely.
Father. Rachel knelt beside him, working at the ropes. It's okay. I'm getting you out. His good eye focused on her, recognition flickering. Sophia's child, he whispered, his voice broken. I prayed you were alive. Save your prayers. Can you walk? I don't know where it is. The list. I told them nothing. I know. You're a good man. The ropes came free. She helped him stand, his weight heavy against her. That's why we're leaving. They made it halfway up the stairs before the door at the top opened. Matteo Ricci stood silhouetted against the light, two of his men flanking him. He looked different than her memories, older, harder, the kind smile she remembered replaced with something calculating and cold. He wore an expensive suit, gold rings on his fingers, success draped across him like armor. He looked at Rachel in her red dress, supporting a bleeding priest, and frowned. Who the hell are you? His hand moved toward his gun. Marco didn't mention. Rachel straightened, letting Father Giuseppe lean against the railing. She met Matteo's eyes, let her smile drop, let the mask she'd been wearing for 15 years finally shatter. Ciao, zio Matteo. Her voice came out soft, childlike, exactly as it had sounded 15 years ago when she'd called him uncle. Remember me? For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Matteo's brain worked, trying to place the voice, the phrase, the impossible possibilities standing before him. Then his face went white.
No.
The word came out strangled. You're dead. You died in the fire. You're a ghost. Rachel's smile was razors. That's what happens when you murder a little girl's mother in front of her, Matteo. You create ghosts. And ghosts? We remember everything. Matteo's gun cleared leather. So did his soldiers. Rachel was faster. She fired twice, not at Matteo, but at the industrial pipes running along the ceiling. Gas pipes. The warehouse had been a factory once, and some infrastructure never got properly removed. The hiss of escaping gas filled the stairwell. No. Matteo lunged forward, but Rachel was already moving, dragging Father Giuseppe down the stairs, back into the basement. She kicked open the far door, a loading dock exit she'd memorized from blueprints stolen from city records. Behind her, Matteo was screaming orders, his men flooding down the stairs. Rachel pulled the lighter from her clutch, cheap plastic, bought at a bodega for $2. She'd never smoked a day in her life, but she'd known she'd need fire. She threw it. The explosion was smaller than movies promised, but loud enough to shake the building. Flames erupted up the stairwell, catching on old wood and leaked gasoline and 15 years of accumulated rage. Fire alarms shrieked. Sprinklers engaged too late. Men screamed. Rachel and Father Giuseppe stumbled into the night, into the maze of shipping containers and abandoned equipment that surrounded the warehouse. Behind them, half the compound was already burning, flames licking up into the sky, smoke billowing black and thick. She heard Matteo's voice cutting through the chaos, hoarse with fury and recognition. Find her. Find that girl. But Rachel was already gone, disappearing into shadows like she'd learned to do when she was 8 years old and men with guns had come for her. Only this time, she wasn't hiding. She was hunting. Father Giuseppe coughed blood as they reached the extraction point, an alley 3 blocks away where Vincenzo's car waited, engine running. Why? The priest gasped as they climbed inside. Why save me? You could have just taken the list. Rachel looked back at the warehouse, at the flames consuming Matteo's fortress, at the empire burning. Because you buried my mother with dignity, she said quietly. And because I needed Matteo to see me, to know that Sofia De Luca's daughter didn't die, that she's been waiting, watching, that every second he's been alive was borrowed time I was kind enough to lend him. She met Father Giuseppe's eyes. But I'm done being kind. The car pulled away, leaving the fire behind. But everyone in New York would see the smoke. Everyone would know. The ghost had a face now. And she was coming for her crown. The abandoned cathedral stood on the edge of Red Hook like a broken prayer, its stained glass windows long shattered, its roof open to the November sky. This was where Sofia De Luca was buried, in the cemetery behind crumbling stone walls, beneath a marker that read Beloved Mother. Matteo had chosen the location deliberately. A final insult. A declaration that, even in death, he controlled the De Luca legacy. Rachel stood at the cemetery gates as dawn broke, watching figures move across the cathedral rooftop. Matteo's mercenaries, Hired guns with no loyalty except to cash. Vincenzo's men scattered throughout the graveyard, using tombstones as cover. And on the surrounding buildings, watching through binoculars and scoped rifles, the commission. Every boss in New York, waiting to see which king would survive. She walked forward alone, unarmed, wearing the same cream blouse and red apron she'd worn the night she saved Vincenzo. Full circle. Deliberate. Rachel, wait. Vincenzo's voice crackled through the earpiece she wore, but she pulled it out, dropped it among the graves. This wasn't his fight anymore. It never had been. The rooftop was accessible through the bell tower, stairs spiraling up through darkness. She climbed without hesitation, each step bringing her closer to the man who'd murdered her childhood and buried it beneath 15 years of silence. Matteo stood at the rooftop's edge, backlit by rising sun, holding a single folder.
The list.
Father Giuseppe had finally revealed its location, hidden behind the altar, beneath Sophia's funeral photo. Poetic. Tragic. Stop there. Matteo's voice carried across broken tiles and bird nests. He looked worse than the warehouse fire. Burns healing badly on his neck, his expensive suit replaced with tactical gear. Desperation had stripped away the polished underboss, revealing the animal beneath. One more step, and everyone dies. I'll release this list, and half the families in New York will burn. Rachel kept walking. 20 feet. 15. I said stop. You still don't understand, do you? Rachel's voice was calm, almost gentle. That list stopped mattering 3 days ago. I memorized every name when Father Giuseppe gave me access. Sent copies to every family. They already know who the traitors are. Already made their decisions. Matteo's face twisted. You're lying. Ask the commission. Rachel gestured to the surrounding rooftops where silhouettes watched. Ask them if they received packages 2 nights ago. Ask them if anyone on that list is still breathing. Silence. Horrible, confirming silence. The list had been Matteo's final leverage, and it was worthless. He held expensive paper, nothing more. It doesn't matter. Matteo pulled his gun, steadied it on Rachel's chest. You're dead anyway. Just a waitress playing dress-up in a world you don't understand. I'm not a waitress. Rachel stopped 10 feet away. I'm Sofia DeLuca's daughter. Rachel Sofia DeLuca, rightful heir to the DeLuca fortune, the DeLuca territory, the DeLuca name you tried to erase. She raised her voice, projecting toward the commission. My mother was murdered by Matteo Ricci 15 years ago because she discovered his betrayal. I survived. I witnessed. I waited. And now I'm claiming what's mine by blood and by right.
I invoca the old laws, il diritto di sangue.
Blood right. Recognition before the commission. Movement on the rooftops. Binoculars lowering. Men conferring. The old laws were sacred, unchangeable. If she was truly Sophia's daughter, if she could prove it, the commission had no choice but to acknowledge her claim. Matteo's gun hand shook. They'll never accept a woman. Never. You're nothing. She's DeLuca blood. Vincenzo emerged from the bell tower, bleeding from a fresh wound in his shoulder, limping badly. His men followed, guns trained on Matteo's mercenaries. I vouch for her identity. Sofia was my cousin. This is her daughter. Then you'll die together. Matteo swung his gun toward Vincenzo, finger tightening on the trigger. Rachel moved. But Vincenzo moved faster, throwing himself between them. The gunshot cracked across the rooftop, impossibly loud. Vincenzo's body jerked, a red flower blooming across his chest. He fell, his gun skittering across broken tiles. Everything stopped. Mercenaries. Soldiers. The commission watching. The world held its breath. Rachel dropped to her knees, caught Vincenzo before his head hit stone. His eyes were unfocused, blood spreading beneath him too fast, too much. Foolish old man, she whispered, tears cutting through her rage. You were supposed to survive this. Couldn't let him, Vincenzo coughed, blood flecking his lips. Couldn't let him take you too. Sofia would never forgive me. Rachel looked at Vincenzo's fallen gun. 3 feet away. Close enough. She stood slowly, picking up the weapon. Its weight was familiar now. She'd practiced with it in Vincenzo's safe house, learning to shoot with the dedication of someone who'd waited 15 years for one moment. Matteo backed toward the roof's edge, his gun still raised but his hand shaking. You won't do it. You're not a killer. You're just a scared little girl who hid in a closet while. You're right. Rachel advanced, her voice steady, the gun unwavering. I was a scared little girl. I hid while you murdered my mother, while you checked her pulse like she was livestock, while you ordered men to find me and burn me alive. She was 5 feet away now, close enough to see the fear in his eyes, close enough to smell his sweat. But that little girl died in the fire you set, Matteo. And what crawled out of the ashes? What spent 15 years becoming invisible, learning, waiting, planning? Rachel smiled, and it was the coldest thing Matteo Ricci had ever seen. That's not a scared little girl. That's vengeance with a heartbeat. Please, Matteo's voice cracked. Please, I can pay you. I can disappear. You'll never.
Questo è per mia madre.
Rachel's finger found the trigger. This is for my mother.
E per ogni anno che mi hai rubato.
And for every year you stole from me. She pulled the trigger. The sound echoed across the cemetery, across the rooftops, across 15 years of silence and rage and grief finally ending. Matteo Ricci fell backward, over the cathedral's edge, his body tumbling through empty air before crashing into Sofia De Luca's grave below. Poetic. Tragic. Justice. Rachel lowered the gun, her hand steady, her breathing calm. She looked toward the commission's watchers, meeting their gaze, without flinching. I am Rachel Sofia De Luca, she said, her voice carrying. And I claim my birthright. 3 months felt like 3 lifetimes. Vincenzo Marcello stood on the balcony of his estate, watching February snow fall across manicured gardens that had seen too much blood. His chest still ached where the bullet had torn through. 2 inches from his heart, the surgeon had said. 2 inches from death. He'd spent 6 weeks in a private hospital, unconscious for the first 10 days, his empire held together by men who weren't sure if their king would ever wake. But he had. And when he did, the world had changed. The commission's vote had been unanimous. 15 families, 15 votes, all in favor. Rachel Sofia De Luca was officially recognized as heir to the De Luca fortune and territory, the first woman in the history of New York's underworld to hold such power. Some families had voted out of respect for the old laws, for blood right that couldn't be denied. Others had voted out of fear, having seen what a girl with nothing to lose could accomplish. Either way, she'd won. The diner in Brooklyn had been transformed. Where Max's all-night diner had served burnt coffee and regret, Sofia's now served authentic Italian cuisine on white tablecloths under soft lighting. The menu was handwritten, changed daily, prices reasonable enough that neighborhood families could afford Sunday dinners. A photograph hung above the bar, Sofia De Luca, young and smiling, holding a baby with blonde hair and her mother's eyes. Vincenzo had driven past it twice, never going inside. Some ghosts deserve their peace. His phone buzzed. A text from Carlo. She's here. The meeting was set for neutral ground. A private room at the Carlyle, expensive enough to be secure, public enough to be safe. Vincenzo arrived first, his movements still careful, still favoring his left side. The bullet had taken more than flesh. It had taken the illusion of invincibility, the comfortable lie that loyalty and power could protect him from betrayal.
Matteo had taught him that lesson.
Rachel had driven it home. The door opened. Rachel walked in wearing a tailored charcoal suit that probably cost $5,000, her blonde braids no longer simple or functional but styled into an intricate crown that wrapped around her head, deliberate, regal, impossible to ignore. She wore minimal makeup, the scar on her jawline visible now, worn like a badge instead of hidden in shame. She moved differently too, no longer the rushed, invisible waitress, but someone who owned every room she entered. She looked like her mother, like Sofia had looked in the old photographs, before Matteo, before death, when the De Luca name still meant something beyond tragedy.
Vincenzo.
She sat across from him, without waiting for invitation. You're looking better. Almost alive. I had a good reason to survive. He poured her wine. A Barolo, expensive. Couldn't let you have all the fun rebuilding New York. Rebuilding. She tasted the wine, approved. Is that what we're calling it? What would you call it? Revolution. Her smile was slight, knowing. Half the old families are gone. New leadership. New rules. Women at the table for the first time in history. That's not rebuilding, Vincenzo. That's starting over. He studied her, this woman who'd saved his life, who'd started a war, who'd stood on a cathedral rooftop and executed the man who murdered her mother without hesitation or regret. She was 23 years old. She'd worked as a waitress 3 months ago. Now she commanded territory worth millions, respect worth more. The commission wants clarity, Vincenzo said, sliding a map across the table. Territory boundaries. Revenue sharing. Rules of engagement. We need to draw lines before someone decides to test them. Rachel examined the map, noting the divisions he'd proposed. Fair splits. Generous, even. Recognition that her claim was legitimate, her power earned. You're giving me Red Hook, Sunset Park, and half of Bensonhurst. She looked up. That's more than Sophia ever controlled. You earned it. Vincenzo leaned forward. But I didn't ask you here just to draw maps, Rachel. I asked you here to propose something different. Different how? A partnership. Real partnership. He met her eyes. Not you ruling your territory, and me ruling mine with a treaty between us. I mean rule together. Combine our resources, our networks, our power. Become something New York has never seen. 2 rulers, equal authority, 1 vision. Rachel set down her wine glass slowly. You're asking me to share power. I'm asking you to multiply it. Vincenzo's voice was steady, certain. Separately, we're strong. Together, we're unstoppable. No family could challenge us. No betrayal could break us. We'd rewrite every rule about how power works in this city. And what would I be in this partnership? Your lieutenant? Your underboss? The woman who stands beside the throne and looks grateful for the privilege. My equal. The word hung between them, heavy with implications. Same authority, same respect, same seat at every table. Rachel stood, walking to the window that overlooked Central Park, snow falling across bare trees and frozen paths. Vincenzo watched her, knowing this moment would define everything that came after. I spent 15 years being invisible, Rachel said finally, her voice quiet. 15 years letting the world forget I existed because I thought that was the only way to survive. And maybe it was for a scared little girl who watched her mother die. She turned, and her eyes held something fierce and unbreakable. But I'm not that girl anymore, Vincenzo. I'm not invisible. I'm not grateful for scraps or tokens or seats I had to earn twice over, because I was born female. I took my throne. I built my empire. And I did it without asking permission from men who thought power was theirs by birthright. Vincenzo's expression didn't change. I know. So understand this. Rachel walked back to the table, extended her hand. I don't stand behind thrones, Vincenzo. I sit beside them, or not at all. Equal means equal. Not equal but. Not equal except. Equal. Vincenzo looked at her offered hand, at the woman who dragged him from a diner floor and changed the course of his life. He thought about Matteo, about betrayal, about the thin line between loyalty and stupidity. He thought about Sophia, about the DeLuca blood running through Rachel's veins, about traditions that had outlived their usefulness. Then he stood and took her hand. Equal, he agreed. Partners. Allies. Whatever we build together. Their handshake was firm, brief, sealing something that would reshape New York's underworld for decades. When they left the Carlisle, they left together, not as king and subject, not as mentor and student, but as 2 rulers who'd earned their crowns in blood and fire. Snow fell across the city, covering old sins with temporary white. Somewhere in Red Hook, a cathedral stood empty, its cemetery holding a grave where Matteo Ricci had fallen and Sofia De Luca had finally found peace. Rachel looked back once as they drove past, her reflection ghostly in the window. Blood calls to blood, she thought, remembering the Sicilian phrase she'd whispered in a diner that felt like a lifetime ago. But what they don't tell you is this: blood doesn't just call for revenge. It calls you home. It calls you to become who you were always meant to be, even if the whole world tried to erase you. Especially then. She'd been erased once. Made invisible. Told her name didn't matter. Her life didn't matter. Her mother's murder didn't deserve justice. The world had been wrong. And now the world would remember. Rachel Sofia De Luca was no longer a ghost. She was a queen. And queens didn't kneel. Not for anyone, not ever again. From waitress to queen. From invisible to unstoppable. Rachel De Luca rewrote every rule and claimed her throne in blood. But power earned is power that must be kept. And in New York's underworld, someone is always watching, always waiting for weakness. Do you think her story ends here? Or is this just the beginning? Drop your thoughts in the comments and subscribe, because legends like this don't come around often, and you are here to witness the birth of a dynasty.